Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Zina Ajos. I'm the Deputy Director of NHBSR. Today we have a webinar in our series Bear in Mind Mental Wellness, and the topic is mental health, youth, and families, a very important one and a current crisis that we're facing. Um, our speaker is Sunny Norton, a partner with us in our mental health awareness webinars. She's the founder and lead consultant at Sunshine Silver Lining. Sunny is a Northern Vermont native who created Sunshine Silver Lining over the last decade, a communications and mental health consulting agency serving New England and beyond. With a background in human services, journalism, and entertainment business, Sunny uses collaboration, education, and facilitation to support individuals, communities, and organizations and further these conversations. Sunny has a master's degree in organizational leadership from Southern New Hampshire University and is finishing her second master's in non-clinical psychology to continue bringing mental health literacy to all and working towards updating systems to serve all. Sunny is graduating this spring with her second master's, and she has been selected to be the virtual ceremonies commencement speaker for Southern New Hampshire University. So congratulations, and I'll hand it over to Sunny.
Thank you so much, Zena. And Debbie, it's always wonderful to have you here with us. And I'm so thankful for my partnership with New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility. So thank you for those of you that are joining us live, and thank you for those of you that are coming online at a later date to think about this topic that affects all of us, right? We all have mental health. We all have different kinds of families, and there are youth in everyone's life. So whether you are a parent, a caregiver, or a trusted adult, there are always things we can think about to help those young people in our life. And also think about our own mental health when we're supporting young people. So, we're going to use a visual aid today. We're going to have some reflection activities. We're going to watch a short video. And we're just going to think about this part of our life together for a little while. So this is our agenda. I always like to start with what we're going to talk about today and some of the content that we're going to review. So we're doing our welcome and we're looking at our session goals. We'll look at that a little bit more. We're going to spend some time understanding common youth mental health conditions. We're going to talk about recognizing early warning signs because prevention and intervention can really help cut down on difficulties down the line. We're going to discuss strengthening family communication around mental health because if we can talk about these things, we can get support for them. And we are going to identify trusted resources and next steps with a focus on New Hampshire. I also want to note for everyone that there is a resource guide specific to New Hampshire that Zena will be sharing with participants, as well as the slide deck. So you'll have access to all this in the future. And because I have the academic part of my career on my mind, I do have a APA, Association of Psychology, reference list available if anyone is interested in any of the studies or the research behind the information that I'm sharing today. We'll also keep an eye on the chat and any questions that you may have. So as we're going through, if you have any questions, feel free to let us know, and you'll have my contact information if you'd like to follow up in the future. So a little bit more about me and just how I got here. I am working around non-clinical psychology and communications. Non-clinical psychology is really just that space between the everyday person and our clinical spaces. And I think that it helps us all help one another, and also it reduces that tax on our systems of care. I am a mental health first aid trainer. I also provide QPR, which is a suicide prevention training, which hopefully we'll be continuing to bring to this community. A suicide prevention specialist. I am a living proof storytelling coach, which talks about advocacy through storytelling. And I have also created my own programming that kind of sits between some of these things that allows us to recognize, engage, and support people regardless of where they are in their life, whether it's mental health or a situational challenge. Just kind of going through this world, having some communication skills around that, and other mental health training programs. So yes, Zena shared some of this. I have my own consulting company. My first career was actually in the theater business in New York City, though I am from Vermont. So I do have advanced degrees in psychology, communications, journalism, theater, and leadership. And I've put that all together to create and engage with evidence-informed and evidence-based tools and communication skills so that we can all build our resilience, our connection, and our wellness. And I do work nationally with the Mental Health Literacy Collaborative that informs quite a bit of my work. All right. So when we're thinking about mental health awareness for youth, we really want to increase that idea of awareness, right? So the more that we can understand the mental health challenges that affect youth, and understand how important it is to address this, the more that we can update our systems, both the care systems and our own systems in our home. How do we support our youth, their friends, people that we may come across that may be having mental health challenges? We want to equip families with communication techniques and strategies to have open conversations about mental health. We talk about physical health with young people. We want to talk about mental health in the same way. If we can recognize early signs, then we can know when something might be happening and what pathway do we want to take to possibly intervene. Is this something that we can take care of together? Is this a visit to the pediatrician or a next level of care? And then we always, whenever we have these conversations, want people to leave with resources, understand what's available on the ground in your communities and in general as well, so that you can make sure you have that support. And yes, we will be providing the slides as well as a resource guide and the follow-up information to everyone that is here with us today and to anyone that watches this later on. Absolutely. So if you've been to one of my presentations before, you may know this, but I always like to start with watching a brief video that shows a bit of Brené Brown's work around empathy versus sympathy. When we are addressing these very important health topics, we want to have empathy for ourselves. We want to have empathy for the young people in our life. We want to have compassion so that we can come together and connect around these topics versus separate ourselves. So I'm going to play a short video from Brené Brown right now. It's an animation and it talks about the difference between empathy versus sympathy. And that will also be included in the follow-up information if you'd like to watch it again. It's just about 3 minutes and then we'll continue through our presentation together.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
There we go. I'll come off mute and we are going to talk about that connection now. So the first thing we want to do is understand youth mental health challenges. So we want to understand the prevalence of mental health issues, and we're going to look at some data in just a moment. But there are increasing rates of anxiety, depression, and other mental health challenges. And we're going to talk a little bit about maybe why that is. We also want to be thinking about what's happening in our society right now that may be leading to more factors that are weighing on young people's mental health, right? So social media, pressures academically, things happening in our culture, right? We really want to be thinking about what else could be weighing in on this. Challenges in accessing care. While there are many things happening in our country and our states to update our systems and have there be more and accessible care, there is still stigma, lack of awareness, and limited resources, especially for those of us that do live in a rural part of the country. Parts of New Hampshire, obviously parts of New England, it can be an hour for someone to access care. So if you want to bring your child to a doctor, you may have to take off a whole day of work. I have that experience myself with my own care of needing to take off a whole day of work, right? So those are things that we have to really address. And then again, that importance of early intervention. So if we get a sprained ankle, we know, okay, we need to get care for this, not continue to walk on it, right? So if we look at some of those signs and symptoms, which we will today, about oncoming mental health challenges, we can determine, is this a situational challenge? Is this typical adolescent behavior? Or is this something that we want to get to a practitioner about, right? And maybe we're not sure. And that's why some of the resources we're going to see in a bit can help us. The more we can understand the challenges that youth are facing, the more that we can develop support systems and access interventions that can help us move past what might be a difficult time. This isn't to say that we're ever going to get past mental health difficulties, but we want to make sure people have the supports to engage with them. So this data is coming from the CDC. And I would also encourage people, and this will be in the mental health literacy follow-up guide that you'll get, to look into your own local data. So there's something called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey that comes out every 2 years, and there will be a link to more information on that in the follow-up data or information. So every 6 to 12th grade school system has access, and most do engage every 2 years in a survey that students take. And they talk about their mental health, their sexual health, their physical health, substance use. And so data for your local supervisory union is available. But what we're seeing is that more youth are experiencing anxiety disorders. There are youth experiencing depression. The depression rates may be a bit lower because we have more diagnoses that could happen. So years ago, we might just see depression or anxiety, but now there could be PTSD, there could be other things young people are diagnosed with. So those are going to be some of the more common diagnoses. And one of the reasons why is that those are diagnoses that many practitioners are familiar with, which is why we need diverse practitioners who can look at other things that young people could be diagnosed with. We're also seeing higher rates of high school students specifically reporting sadness or hopelessness. And it is a reality that suicidality or thoughts of suicide is something that young people are thinking about. And it may be scary, and we want to make sure that we are understanding that this is something young people are considering, thinking about, so that we can support them. So again, this is going to be general CDC data from the last couple of years, but we also can look at more local level data, to make sure that we know what's happening right in our community. And while data is very important and informs funding and systems, you are going to know your young people the best, and you are going to be able to have a direct conversation with them so you can learn what's happening to them in their life and their experience. So some of the things that we want to think about when we're thinking about what is going along with these common experiences that young people have, whether they become diagnosed with anxiety, depression, or other disorders, or they're just experiencing, and when I say the word just, they're experiencing situational stress, right? High school can be difficult. Transitioning from elementary school into middle school, from middle school into high school, the summertime, screen use, right? There's a lot of things that are weighing on the plates of young people as we identified. So we want to clue into some common things that may pop up, right? Is there excessive worry that's getting in the way of their ability to live, laugh, love, go through their daily life? We want to look for marked shifts in their behavior. So, does that worry include, or have you seen a difficulty concentrating that maybe they didn't have before? Are they withdrawing from things that they love? Are they experiencing sadness and expressing that they're feeling hopeless? Is there a loss of interest in activities that they enjoy? An example around that might be is maybe you have a student, we're coming up on the summer season, that normally plays soccer or some sort of team sport, and this year they don't want to do it. Do they want to replace it with something else? Or are they like, I just want to stay home in my bedroom all summer, right? That would be an example of something we want to pay attention to. Are they feeling more fatigued, right? Is this a typical teenage behavior, or is it a sign of maybe depression, right? We might not be sure. We want to, again, pay attention to those changes in sleep, appetite, and again, as we end here, a marked shift in behavior. So I understand this can be a lot of information and it can be a little bit ambiguous, right? So as a caregiver, cluing into the routine, right? And paying attention to how are things changing can give you an idea. Is this something that we might want to talk to a practitioner about? You also need to think about yourself, right? If you're dealing with a young person that isn't sleeping, is that affecting your sleep? If you're dealing with a young person that's struggling to concentrate on their homework, how is that affecting you, right? So that's a good example of the fact that you may not be having an oncoming mental health challenge, but you may have a situational challenge because the care of the young person is affecting your routine. So it does affect the whole family system. And then in turn, those of you that are here as employers, we are whole people. We have lots of things that go on. So a bit of a separate workshop could be, how are you addressing supporting your employees in the workplace? And those are things that we have offered and continue to offer. I'll give a plug for mental health first aid here. UNH offers mental health first aid, and I also can set it up with your organizations. But mental health first aid is about an 8-hour training that goes into details about all these things. So you can spend time really thinking about the different diagnoses and the different signs and symptoms. And how do we tease that out from typical teenage behavior? We can't always. We may not be able to. So what we want to do is we want to think about some skills that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But I'm just going to give us an opportunity to take a minute or two to reflect on what we just talked about, right? So we're seeing higher rates of diagnoses. We're also seeing young people maybe just struggling in between, receiving a diagnosis or not receiving a diagnosis. But what I'd love to hear, anyone who's willing to share, or for those of you that are maybe watching later on, just think about how does this data reflect what you're actually seeing in your family, the school community you might be a part of, or your larger community. Does it ring true that young people may be struggling a bit more? Does it ring true that it may be a little confusing to understand where they're at? So I'll just give us a moment, and you can just reflect. You can share in the chat if you have anything that you'd like to share about this topic. Thank you so much for sharing. So we have here in the chat lots of achievement anxiety in high school. And actually, this time of year can be when that pops up a lot, right? Whether a young person is graduating or at a time of thinking about what they're going to do after high school or what am I going to do this summer? This idea, as shared in the chat, stress around measuring up, right? So that's absolutely something. Now, will that turn into a diagnosis? That might be a time to pay attention to. Uh, are these young people that are experiencing achievement anxiety? I think that's a great term. Um, is it affecting their ability to enjoy life as well? And that might lead to something called, perfectionism, which you can't be diagnosed with, but perfectionism can come alongside some mental health challenges. So if a young person is struggling with achievement, whether making achievements or maybe overachieving, then we may want to check in with a pediatrician, a guidance counselor, and see is there any way that we can sort of reduce maybe the workload or find other ways to channel that ambition might be what it is. Great. Some what under other comments here in the chat. There are more pressures for kids today versus in the past. Absolutely, which can result in more mental health challenges. There's a wonderful film called Screenagers, and I actually just had a showing of it last night in New England, and it really looks at between homework, screens, social media, uh, all different ways that technology is in our life, all the added pressures that young people feel today that maybe the grown-ups and the caregivers can't necessarily relate to. And that's okay because there's a generational aspect of this. What we can do is we can connect around it. We're going to talk about that shortly. Stress around immigration equity changes, absolutely. And the news cycle someone mentioned. There's so much information coming at us in people's homes. There may be a fear about what will happen if they engage with different agencies. And so, another part of this work that I hope to bring a workshop to the team soon is around media literacy and understanding where do we get our information, what are safe organizations we can engage with, so that we can really craft almost a journalistic view as to how we engage with content. One of my first degrees is in journalism, and it wasn't because I wanted to become a journalist. It was because I could tell, as someone who has loved technology since I was 12 years old in rural New England and built a website, that it was going to be important for me to understand how to harness the technology for my good, for my own good, and how to understand how to parse through it versus letting it control me. That's so great to hear that people enjoy screenagers. Maybe we can talk about doing a screening in New Hampshire. That would be really wonderful. Contests on social media, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Technology and media can absolutely be an extremely unhealthy tool for young people. And the grown-ups in the room are the ones that can take control over that. So, Zena, let's make a note. I think maybe we could have a media literacy workshop as well, because that's something that some folks here seem to be passionate about and have some great ideas around. So, what is one thing that we can do to combat all of this difficulty, right? Because we really want to get to a place of health, and it's really communication. And that starts in the family. And I also want to note family looks like many different things, right? Some people live with their biological parents, some people live with other biological family members, some young people live with family friends. Some young people are in the foster care system. So I sort of use the language as trusted adults and also family, because family is going to mean different things to different people. And also, for those of you that are parents, you know the pressure and how much you carry. So having the gift of community and having other trusted adults that are a part of your family can really give that young person lots of people to talk to. But we're just going to use the term family generally today and think about how within that family system we can communicate about mental health. So one thing we want to do when communicating about mental health is actually communicate about it, right? It reduces stigma and it promotes early help seeking, right? So letting the young people in your life know that you took this workshop today, right? finding opportunities through the resources we'll look at in a moment to come together. Watch a showing of Screenagers. Find an appropriate film that talks about youth mental health that you can watch together and talk about. I'll just share because we're on the topic. One film series that's wonderful is Pixar's Inside Out 1 and 2. If you can find that Pixar Inside Out film series, you can find no-cost learning guides online, and you can watch that with young people and then talk to them about what they think about the different characters. So that's a really nice tool that you can use as a family activity and to learn. We also want to practice empathetic listening. There is something called emotion coaching that comes from the Gottman Institute. And emotion coaching helps grown-ups create space for young people to talk about how they feel without getting should on. And I like to say, don't should on people, because as grown-ups, we have to tell young people what to do to stay safe. But when we're helping them learn how to talk about how they feel, we really want to foster a space where they can open up without judgment and sort of work through how to talk about how they feel. Another thing to think about is, how did we learn to talk about our emotions? How did our parents, how did our caregivers talk about mental health? Some cultures don't talk about mental health. Other cultures talk about everything but mental health. And then some cultures and some people grew up in homes where they really did learn how to talk about how they feel. There's no judgment there, but we want to reflect on our experiences so that we can think about what we're creating for the young people in our life. Asking open-ended questions is a really great tool. So sometimes we have to ask yes or no to a young person because we need to get at, what's going on here, right? But we could say, how was your school day? Tell me something that you learned. How did you feel this afternoon in class? And give them a chance to sort of come up with an answer that might give us more information. And then if we need to just pause while we think about an answer, that's fine. We want to listen non-judgmentally. And programs like RES that I oversee and Mental Health First Aid give us some more knowledge around how to listen non-judgmentally. We want to validate emotions. We don't want to dismiss them. Acknowledging that sounds really hard. It sounds like that might have been difficult for you, instead of, oh, well, get over it. Oh, don't worry about it, right? So we also can use this as an opportunity to reflect on what are the things that helped us feel good when we were growing up, or even now as adults, and what are the things that didn't feel so good, and try to model that for the young people. Another really great tool with anyone in your life, I do this with people of all ages in my personal life, but especially with young people, is find, 5 to 10 minutes to do a check-in. For those of you that have seen Screenagers, they do a weekly check-in about tech. They may also include mental health in that. So maybe every Thursday night or maybe every Sunday afternoon. This is also something I share with families who are going through separation and divorce, right? Find a regular check-in time to connect around, how did you feel this weekend? Or how did this week go for you? Because then you're really getting into the habit of having that sort of emotional check-in that allows space for processing. So these are things that this comes with all these different ideas, but we really want to create space. And for what we've identified, that technology is kind of ruling our life, screens are everywhere. We can all put the phones down, we can put the iPads down, we can turn the TV off, we can take a walk, we could sit together over breakfast and give just some space for people to get together. And young people may push back on that if that's new in your home. But they are going to follow our guide. They're going to follow our lead, and they will want to engage eventually. Or if they really push back, it gives you more information on where they may be at and what some other tools, maybe trying some other tools might be helpful. So we're going to do another reflection right now. Just take a moment or two. I sort of already began to lead toward this, but think about what helps you feel heard and supported. What are things that people have offered you that help you? And can you take that and use that to guide how you support the young people in your life? And as well, if you have any tips or tricks that have helped you with your young people, or even for the employers that have given your employees space to care for their young people, what has worked? So what has helped you, and how can you use that to help the young people in your life? So you can just take a moment to reflect personally, and if you'd like to share in the chat, would love to hear from anyone that has some ideas they'd like to share. Great point here in the chat. Listening without interruption, which is difficult as an adult, absolutely, not to jump in and give advice. So in mental health first aid, there's something called reassurance and information, and I add not advice because that allows us to really give that space to listen and to practice emotion coaching with young people. Now, there may be something that happens with your young person that does require you to jump in and help, but finding that time to just sit and listen, carving out that space. Maybe you go for a walk, maybe you cook a meal together, maybe you go for a drive. That can be really helpful. Wonderful. Well, we're going to continue on. But yeah, reflecting on what helps you can certainly help you help the young people in your life as well. So some family support strategies, right? And these are things for employers that you might consider looking into EAP. Do they have support for some of these things, or for you yourself as a parent or a caregiver? You know, building routines that include those emotional check-ins, right? We've talked about that. We're fostering communication and emotional awareness. So in the same way that maybe some people practice sports, go to the gym, let's do some emotional fitness as well. If there are activities that you love that'll encourage expression, so do you all love music? Do you love, as I mentioned, watching movies or TV together that can have some dialogue after? Are there art projects? Do you love to write? Could you go for a walk or a hike together? We're moving into a beautiful season in New England where you can do those things. But this way, a young person might be processing how they feel while they're doing another activity. And sometimes these are called shoulder to shoulder activities or side by side activities. Because if you give a young person an activity, they may eventually open up. So, what can you encourage your family to engage in that then may allow you to have some conversations together? And I love this in the chat. An important skill is listening and being heard. Those are two different things, right? We want to listen, not necessarily to respond right away. And that's really difficult when you're a caregiver because we immediately switch into fixing mode. And if it's an emergency, we may need to do that. But if we practice these topics all the time, then it becomes more common in our life, right? So this really is a practice. This is not something that even myself who thinks about it all the time, especially in my life and my personal life with the young people, I really have to be present and make sure that I don't go into fixing things immediately. Also, I think this one is very important, but we need to model our own healthy coping strategies. We need to think about our boundaries. We need to show our family that we can manage our stress, that we can set positive examples. So that might mean we're putting our phone down. That might mean we're shutting down our computer. That might mean I'll say to people in my life, I just need to finish this thought, write this down, put it down, and then I can listen, right? Or put it down and listen. So that's something that we want to be thinking about. How can we be modeling taking care of ourselves? There's many more things that you can come up with that make sense for your family, but really maybe thinking, over the next 2 months, let's say April, spring break is happening throughout the country right now, into May, into June. What are a couple of things that you can begin to implement? So maybe by this time next year, or even by the fall, you have that regular check-in. You have that regular activity that you're doing together so that you really have carved out that time to connect. And yes, it's really great to hear that side by side idea, really young people will really share in the car, really share when they're taking a walk, really share when they're maybe making dinner with you. It's really an interesting phenomenon that sometimes that face to face, like sit down and let's talk right here might not be the right setting, but you can carve out activities where maybe that check-in will happen naturally. So you'll want to see what works best for your family. All right. So thinking about the future and thinking about an action item that you might take, you're welcome to share in the chat, or you can just reflect solo. What is one new idea you might introduce at home? Or for those of you that are in the workplace, what is something you might consider introducing in the workplace to support the emotional well-being of your staff while they take care of their families or while you take care of your family. So I'll give you two examples. As an employer, what I might do, and I'm actually bringing on my first employee soon, is offer that person an hour a week to take care of family activities or appointments built right into their schedule. Just take that time because I know if that employee has that time on the clock to make a phone call to a doctor, to set up an appointment, it's going to help them be more focused. They're not going to have to feel like they're stealing time. So how can how can you find an appropriate way in your employment setting to encourage people to take care of themselves? At home, I do, depending on my travel schedule, I'll send an email at the beginning of the month or the beginning of the week reminding the people in my household, this is when I'm going to be traveling, this is what our meal plan is, and this is who's using what car. And from that, I'll ask, can we find a time because of the schedule to sit down and just check in on anything that you might like to talk about? So I sort of set a routine up for everyone, and then I ask for people's response on it. Allowing flexible schedules for staff is beautiful. I know a lot of people are taking a little bit of time in the afternoon to pick their kids up from the bus station, the bus stop, not the bus station, and then they're coming back in to do a little bit more email. If that works for someone and you can allow for that, that's beautiful. Sharing a moment of personal preferences and ideas during staff meeting. That's beautiful, showing that you care. Yeah, just finding ways to connect as humans because, and I do have data around this if you'd like it. I didn't bring it today because it's not necessarily a worksite wellness presentation, but the more that you allow people to show up as who they are as human beings in the workplace, the more valued they're going to feel and the more that they're going to, be present at work. And so if that means that someone needs to, let's say, leave 15 minutes early so they can pick up their young person from a dance class and they're going to come in 15 minutes early the next morning, why not, right? It might be a cultural shift in a staff meeting, inviting everybody to share what's one thing that you're looking forward to over summer break. That's encouraging people to be as reflective or honest as they'd like to be. And this is beautiful. Yes, the more we know each other, the more we can assist each other. And that's really true, right? We're humans. We wanna get to know one another and then we can support each other. All right, so some help. So if we do need help, if we've assessed and are at a point where, this is more than something maybe we can handle on our own, there is next level of care. And there's a lot of resources on the ground in New Hampshire, in New England. And as mentioned, there's going to be follow-up from New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility with the presentation, but also with a resource guide with links to things right in New Hampshire you can access. So some ideas that you might think about now, are there guidance counselors that you can engage with at any part of your young person's schooling? Elementary school, high school, college, even if you have a young person, let's say you have someone over 18 who's in the workplace, do they have EAP? What's available? Find out, maybe have a conversation with them. Many organizations, pediatricians' offices have social workers that would have additional resources for you. Are there school-based mental health programs at your young person's school? Can you find out, do they offer different support groups, workshops, connection to community programming? Are there family and youth centers around where you are? That might be something that the school knows about or that your local pediatrician's office knows about. What youth programs are available? I know on the ground here in Vermont, I've done empathy after school programs. I've done communication after school programs. Let's see what's available for your young person as well. New Hampshire has a beautiful nonprofit field. I'm sure that there are many businesses connected right here with New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility that may have different services. But we also now have the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. This is active in every state in the country, and it is not just for suicide or crisis, it is also a warm line. So you can text, call, or chat. Maybe your young person had a really difficult day at school, things didn't go so well at home, and you're feeling a little overwhelmed. You can text them and say, I just need to process this with someone. And there are trained counselors to talk you through what happened, what are your plans, how are you going to take care of yourself? And that's a really nice service that we now have in the US. The crisis text line is still available. It's pretty similar to 988. It's just another version. And I'll note that the 988 Lifeline can also connect you to local mobile supports, whereas the crisis text line is national. So if you're looking to get local mobile supports in New Hampshire, 988 will connect you to that. And then there's a strong NAMI chapter in New Hampshire. So there are parent and family groups and education classes. That's actually how I began really on my path with mental health specifically, was going to a NAMI education class and learning about different mental health challenges and saying, hey, I think more people might be interested in this. So there'll be information on NAMI New Hampshire in that follow-up guide. And I'd love to hear from you. What might you add to this list? I just referenced EAP, Employee Assistant Programs. So making sure you know what's available for yourself or that your employees know what is available through EAP. And would love to hear from you what you might add to this list or any specific resources that you have found really helpful in supporting yourself, your employees, and also the young people in your life too. And again, you can share in the chat or just reflect for yourself. I actually might add, and I'm surprised I didn't put this on here, so I apologize, faith communities. I would put faith communities on the resource list. Wonderful, the Trevor Line and New Hampshire Outright. Absolutely, that's great for LGBTQ youth. 211 New Hampshire, that's beautiful. I actually worked on 211 in Vermont during the pandemic on a mental health line as well. So yeah, making sure people's basic needs are met, making sure they're connected to services, absolutely great resources. You could even call New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility and ask them maybe if they have some members that you could talk to. And you'll have my information. I'm always happy to brainstorm, have a one-on-one, talk to you about finding a resource that might help you help yourself or your young people. All right. So with young people, right, there's all of this there's this data, there's diagnoses, there's all the difficulty they're having, but storytelling is a really powerful tool for engaging with young people and for supporting young people. So I'm a Living Proof advocacy coach. I think it was just last month or maybe in February, I can't remember now. We had a storytelling workshop that was super fun. I hope we'll plan another one later in the summer or the fall. But if there is material that your young people love, if they love Harry Potter or there's a TV show they enjoy, maybe explore that story with them. Do a little research around it. See if there's a study guide. Read with them. Read a book together and talk about it. Look at picture books with those younger kids. There is science behind storytelling and science about why storytelling helps us process things. And if you do have a young person that maybe isn't so interested in opening up, maybe you can read a book together and that will open up your conversation. And it also can give them diverse experiences, learn about different times in our world, just help them broaden their understanding and their personal growth. So storytelling comes in many forms, and I think it's a really wonderful tool that you can have right in your home. Some of my most wonderful memories of a child was reading books with my parents. And today, still, 40 years later, we all love reading and we love stories in many different forms. And thank you so much for dropping in the chat. You can watch the storytelling workshop that we did. So I'm always happy to talk about storytelling with people too, as well as for engaging young people. And I do have a program I'm bringing to some high schools in New England around storytelling with young people, which is exciting. So look, it's never going to be something that I believe you can't be an expert on this topic because it's always changing. As someone highlighted, from when we were young to now, right? It's a different world. So I believe that we have to have lifelong learning around these topics. And that's why it's so nice to have so many of you here today. So some things you might look into: motivational interviewing, emotion coaching, be thinking about media literacy, digital literacy. These are all things that we can learn more about. Watch YouTube videos, find influencers that we might enjoy, find books, but those are some key terms that could help you. Mental health first aid's wonderful training in New Hampshire. UNH has an overseas programming. I'm happy to talk with any organization around mental health first aid. Question, Persuade, Refer, and Recognize, Engage, Support are two shorter programs. QPR looks at suicide prevention specifically. REST looks at general communication around life's challenges and how they may become mental health difficulties or not. NAMI, as mentioned, has a lot of no-cost trainings out there for people, virtual and in person, and the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. I know sometimes when we see the names of these programs, there's crisis braided into it, but all of this work looks at prevention. And prevention is about, as we heard, empathy and connection. So if we are connected, we may be able to avoid crisis, or we will have support through crisis that we may be experiencing. And we want to turn that learning into action, right? We want to understand mental health is a part of our overall health in the same way that we take care of our respiratory system or our muscles. We want to be taking care of our mental health. In all the work that you read about mental health for young people, family is possibly the number one protective factor. All youth need is one caring and consistent adult in their life. If that can be a parent or a family member that's in the household, that's incredible. If it can be a teacher or a community member, that's just fine too. We really want to be clued into what's happening with the young people, and that is communication. And there's so many resources, as you've seen. I hope we don't have to go through this alone. You may have to cultivate relationships and go to some workshops to create that connection, but please see me as a resource as well. I'm happy to make connections. New Hampshire has shared information in the chat about additional resources, but really just knowing they're there, I hope gives you some comfort as you think about what's going on for our young people and their caregivers in today's world. And so one last reflection before we wrap things up today. If there's one small takeaway from today's session or one small step that you can take as a family or even an employer to support the mental health of your young people, would love for you to drop it in the chat. That's a great way to engage with next steps here. I know what I'm going to do is actually take my mental health literacy work and get it into a presentation form, and I'm going to be scheduling a call with Zena anyway to catch up soon, and I'm going to get a media literacy workshop on the schedule for the New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility members. So keep an eye out for that. Thinking about the tradition of a regular check-in, I'll share with you all. My parents got separated when I was quite young. I was 9 years old, and my father traveled for work, and he would still to this day, he would check in with me every Sunday. We would talk on the phone from being a little girl. And to this day, I still get text messages now on Sundays asking me how my week is going to be. So, 30 years later, you can have those traditions. And absolutely, just be there. They might always approach you. They might not even know that they need support from you, but if you're available, then they'll engage with that when they're ready. So yes, there's lots of things that we can do to help young people. So with that, thank you so much for coming today. Please feel free to stay in touch. I love my touch points throughout the year with the members. I hope to plan some in-person events in the future as well. Thank you so much, Zena and Debbie, for having me, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Sunny. Thank you as always. Very useful and very insightful and helpful with all the resources. We'll follow up with recordings and resources and the links that Sunny sent. Thank you all.